All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. It is the final installment of our SOFA speaker series. And thank you for everybody that has come out to these over the semester and really supported this during these very weird times for SOFA and for really the rest of the world, clearly. And it has been such a fun series to put together, and I think we are really ending on a bang today here with Holly Cahill. So why don't you take it away, Holly?
Thanks so much, Darby. And thank you for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be here with you all. And I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen. And I thought I would just begin by giving you a little bit of background about who I am and what I do. So I'm a process-based, multidisciplinary artist working in painting and drawing, print, fibers and sculpture. And my interests over the years have brought me to explore the intersection of the natural and the built environment. And I have a deep fondness for the uncanny and unknown elements that exist within our daily lives. I got my MFA back in 2004, so it's been quite a bit of time since I've been in graduate school. So I wasn't sure where to begin this lecture. And ultimately, I decided that 10 years was a good round number. So that's where I'm going to start us off. But after I got my MFA, I moved to Chicago in 2005, and I've taught at various art centers and universities. And I took a position at a law firm for many years. So I actually worked in real estate for quite some time and made work on the side. But in 2017, I was really fortunate to leave that work, really put art more at the center of my life, my studio work, my curatorial work, my involvement with the artist run space Tiger Strikes Asteroid. And I'm going to talk to you guys more about that space towards the end of the lecture. So I'm going to focus more on kind of the evolution within my work, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have about that as well. Okay, so we're in 2011. So years after working in real estate and kind of responding a lot to the graphic nature of floor plans and surveys, I really came to appreciate that graphic nature that they were representing. And I found myself taking on new subject matter with a strong relationship to the built environment. And I was really drawn to this as a child as well. I lived in an area that saw a lot of construction, so I was constantly kind of taking a look at those types of spaces. So this first image was an earlier time in that series of works, and it began as a tracing of these floor plans that were gifted to my husband by his father of a house that my in-laws had planned to build but never did. And the section here is the garden and the gallery, the garden terrace, and then there was a gallery space because they were actually big time art lovers, both of them. The architect was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright's, and the local builders in upstate New York, they really didn't know how to build such a house. So they ended up not building it, but also they both seemed to regret that decision quite a bit. So this gift of these plans was really intriguing to me as something to kind of focus my attention on for a little while. So I was at a residency in Ohio called Harold. Well, it was called Harold Arts at the time, and now it's 8550 Ohio. And I'm not sure it's still going the same way that it was, but obviously I didn't have the money to build this house, and or intend to actually, build it, quote unquote, build it. But I took a section of the floor plan from the prior image where the inside and the outside gallery space came together and built it to scale in the landscape using stakes in the ground, ropes. I had this wonderful drawing tool called the Dasher. And all these things, I shoveled, I dug out different areas of the the landscape. I documented all the little things, and it was a really minimal work, but it was a really impactful work, which is why I'm sharing it with you here. As with tracings, I also love taking impressions of actual objects and layering imagery. And this work was kind of started by capturing an impression of one of the stakes that I had used in the prior work I just showed you. The stake was used to mark out the dimensions of the floor plan. And then on top, layering starts to happen with the ink and the charcoal and graphite. Within the title, oscillating compass rings, I was really thinking about how compasses are used to help us, navigate our place in the world, and how our direction's constantly shifting in relationship to the environment and where we are heading. So this work, An Encounter, was the first where a suggestion of the body and architecture were meeting in a space that's once both kind of religious, referencing a temple, for example, or a little bit industrial, almost like an oil rig. So an erotic and conflicting elements that kind of took on these polar spaces for me. And I was more focused on referencing the framing part of construction, and because that's where the inside and the outside space were kind of in so much conversation. And it was prior to kind of building those walls that, keep some in and others out. And there was also a lot of ambiguity about what the building and its purpose would also ultimately become. While I was on a residency in 2012 in Canada at the Banff Center, I was kind of working with some of the residents to go out into the landscape at night, which was kind of an absurd and funny process because we had to wait all day for it to become night because we were so far north. So it would be, 11 or 12 at night, and then we would be finally able to venture out and make these drawings in the landscape. So I was really interested in the conversation that I could have with another resident, and each one of them kind of led us differently through the environment. But in this case, we were just basically mimicking the stars above us, kind of like we were receiving some sort of cosmic message, and also disappearing within the process. So because of the time lapse and the movement, is sort of erasing our own bodies within that. The work following would reference light or lack of light, and I was really interested in the illumination of the masked areas. So I used a lot of tape to mask off after kind of building up this underpainting. And for me, they were performing like an armature or a support without, like I was saying before, that structure weighing them down. But the linear elements are also meant to be ungrounded and in flux. At other times, the imagery became still. So this one refers back to the floor plan that I shared with you earlier, and this is the sliding glass doors from the floor plan. Of course, it's an abstraction, but that was kind of on my mind at the time that I was making it, thinking about the pathway between the garden terrace and the gallery. Perceived heat and temperature of color were also something I was thinking about within this work. Through the eaves references that part of the house that is more associated with the attic and with dreaming. Pitched rooftops were a source of inspiration, and having a bird's eye view from above where you were inside the work in a way that made your orientation questionable. Within all these works, I developed a method and was able to use that as a guiding force. So I didn't need to focus on a particular result, but just kind of go through certain steps to arrive at the image. And I think that gave me a lot of freedom. Another thing I became really interested in within this work was the idea of the fourth dimension, which is something that really captivated the surrealists. and had parallels to so many things I was seeing in science and film. If you think about Interstellar or Being John Malkovich, for example, the idea that multiple dimensions are all around you, yet not being able to access those dimensions seem to have so many parallels to just everyday experience. Nesting dimensions references the idea of one dimension inside the other, almost like Matryoshka dolls. So after a time of working more exclusively on paper, and I have a background in painting and print, so I really was working on canvas for a long time and then kind of shifted to paper and now back to canvas with a new impulse while still working with that language that I was developing earlier. So this series of works called Propositional Object for a Future Interior were meant to be, they're soft sculptures, basically filled with fiber fill and very huggable, as one curator liked to like to joke. We're meant to be interactive, both physically and psychically, creating space for bodies and conversation. So I began to think of them as a soft geometry, using painting and pattern to replicate soft sculptural forms that could be scaled up and down, and I could make multiples, which I did several versions of this particular form. They were also a way to reconfigure a painting, obscure its original form, transform it, and allow it to operate like a puzzle. So this doesn't have a title really, but it's myself with the object that I was just showing you. And after years behind a desk, I really felt the need to be more active and also take better care of my physical health. So I took up yoga and modern dance, and I found so much inspiration in these choreographic sequences of the dancers. And oh, they were so difficult too. I found it very, it looks so easy, but it's so hard. How the movement helped to like unblock energy in the body was really fascinating to me. So this photo is from a fairly brief series where I would set a timer and find configurations with the prop object to kind of capture relationship between myself and it, almost like a stage prop of sorts. At the time, I was really excited by the work of Yvonne Rainer, Trisha Brown, Boris Charmatz, and Xavier Leroy. And Xavier Leroy actually did a workshop at Columbia years ago, and I was able to attend it, which was amazing. So rather than numbering the objects, I thought using letters from the alphabet could develop into conversations. So I like the idea of the title sort of referring back to language. And this is another piece within that series, this one being D. In this case, I was interested in how the object itself could be reconfigured and the multiples within it strung together to form the work, just adjusting the scale slightly with each new form. And you can see it kind of reconfigured here just to give you an impression of another possibility. This work became its own body, kind of developing over many, many years. I truly did not know when to stop. The entire piece is built up only through knotting and wrapping canvas, so it's actually really heavy. But it helped me to think about the choreography of the hand and those activities that I found, very satisfying to work with at the time. And in this case, it would be like the tearing sound of the canvas and, the physical wrapping and knotting. So up until this point, the works consisted of a singular painting, reconfigured. And after working on canvas again for a while, I wanted to see how I could bring together multiple paintings into one work. I was really influenced by the exhibitions I was seeing in the textiles department at the Art Institute of Chicago. Fabulous, fabulous shows and very influential. And discovering quilts made me reflect on a whole area of art history that I felt like was, not a part of my education. So this painting is sewn together. Well, it's actually the multiple paintings are sewn together out of sequence as a form of weaving, misalignment, skipping, and asymmetrical pattern forming. The title for the female craftsman is kind of pointing to the history of crafts and is a commemoration to these artists that just weren't recognized. Traditional crafts often produced by women for domestic use. So the painting mimics the form of the quilt and has the repeating pattern of the triangular form from previous works kind of around the border. And it was important to me that the painting kind of perform a function. So I wanted it to hold something. And in this case, it holds a wooden kind of molding. It's kind of referencing back to those interests in architecture and the kind of contrast of the hardness of that versus the soft, unprimed canvas. A lot of the imagery was made just through very simple gestures, tearing paper and layering. I use a lot of spray in my work. I use a lot of really watered down inks and acrylics. At times I fold the canvas and then we'll flatten it out, folding it and spraying it and then flattening it. And this is another example of a similar work just completed more recently. And these are made completely through improvisation. So they do take a lot of time to develop because there's no plan ahead of time. It's really through the process of assembling and reassembling that they arrive at their form. So I was glad to hear from John that there's a number of printmakers in this group that usually attends the talks. And I did actually do a lot of work in graduate school, but had not come back to it since that time. So I was photography then, and as an undergrad, I did a little bit of intaglio as well. But I decided to for residency at Budnick Press. And if you guys don't know about that, it's a wonderful press, and I've seen so much great work come out of it. So I was completely seduced by the possibility of making more print work with them in 2018, and was really thankful to have a residency there for a month where I could develop new work and really re-examine my work from the past too. This is just a single print. I wanted to show you a little bit of a close-up, but it's made with multiple plates. It's and papers and different types of threads and things that are inserted in between the plate and the paper. And here's a larger view of the work as a whole. So they're both individual and they work as a group as well. They're intaglio, incorporate monotype, and they really allowed me to kind of separate some of the thematics within my work, to pull apart and think about what they each represent. And it was exciting for me that it brought in all this light, where before there was so much darkness and density. And there was a lot of chance that happened in the process with these multiple papers over one plate and kind of running through different runs, which was exciting for me, and I could respond and react to that. And then when I was pulling the piece together, I started kind of more intentionally, adding monotype and things in to kind of, think about bringing that work together. I also really love the idea of dissonance and how that strategy in music is meant not to give listeners the satisfaction of knowing a pattern. So as humans, we are really adept at recognizing patterns. So it's interesting for me to disrupt that tendency of thinking we understand or can predict something once we discover the sequence. Okay, so after I had my Sputnik residency, I became a Hatch resident at the Chicago Artists Coalition, and that was in 2019. So we've already gone quite a bit of time forward, which is good. Just see how we're doing on time. Okay. So when I was creating the prints, one thing I was thinking about was the way I was working with similar to the form of a form of nest building, like an avian architecture, and that I was gathering from all these different elements within my work, and also referencing different aspects of the natural world. There was also kind of this sense of activity and flight in the movements, um, both individually and in relation to the whole process. So at the same time, I was interested in the body and how certain types of imaging are able to detect what's under the surface. So you see on the bottom right-hand corner there, there's an MRI. The MRI reads the body's natural magnetism by realigning our protons with a giant magnet, which is really, very interesting. And I started getting really curious about magnetism in general, and that brought me to the starlings. So starlings are sometimes referred to as permanent magnets because they have this ability called magnetoreception, which allows them to detect magnetic fields. So it was just really fascinating that they have almost like an internal compass. They kind of know and they can develop these regional maps. Um, I was also really interested in operation, which is the top right hand, all these little dots being birds, which is amazing because they really gather in these huge flocks. And the way they fly together is really particular in that they twist and turn and they don't have a leader, but they look at all the seven birds around them, and then from that they're able to kind of navigate the flight, and it's sort of like a dance, um, and also mysterious why they do it, although it does have some functions to keep predators away. So as I was getting really interested in the starling, we were also planning an exhibition, and it was a two-person show with myself and Kushila Vora, and it was curated by Alexis Brocky at the Coalition. And this was from an announcement for an event that we held. And the title of the show is "In the Mud and Slush of Opinion and Tradition, the Body Becomes Landscape and I Become a Transparent Eyeball." So I just wanted to read you a little bit from the event invitation, kind of get a sense of what we were planning. As you walk in a new or familiar landscape, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What does this do to your relationship to your surroundings and yourself? Focused on the act itself and understanding born through walking, our path will draw inspiration from the starling's memoration and make space for reflection through discussion and written exercises. As we discover and observe, we will gather, look up, bring attention to the moment of the walk, hold something in our hands, and see the layers of time. And I love, I guess the reason I include this event is because I love events that are, sometimes outside the gallery. I think they can add a whole nother layer to the experience when you do enter into the gallery space. So this event was held at Montrose Point Bird Sanctuary, and the ultimate, I think, I think for me, it was sort of, I was thinking about the dream scenario of like, wow, if we could go and see a starling murmuration, that would be amazing. But on a practical level, that wasn't something we could predict. But we knew that there was this amazing place where so many birds, when they're migrating, this was during migration, will need a spot to stop and rest. And because of the environment at this place, there's dunes, there's forest. It's very small, but it has a huge variety of native plants. It draws just a diverse amount of birds. So we hired a birder, which was also really exciting. I've never been on any kind of guiding tours with a birder, and he was just so knowledgeable and could, pick up on all the different calls. And he pointed out so much that we would have never seen. So that was amazing. And before the event started, or I guess as the event was starting, we asked people to write down some observations of the place to just kind of like get a little quiet and start kind of listening to what's around and making observations. And we had each brought scraps from our work and paper. And so this is the sort of moment up here at the top where we're after everyone has taken some time to write things down, we're sharing those, and then you can kind of see a little bit about the journey from within too. So we use these scraps for our exhibition takeaway, and just to read a few kind of things that people had written. Wrapped in stillness, a cardinal always makes me smile. A tree swallow nests, my feet touching the ground. And Alexis actually assembled this in a way that kind of mimicked our path through the sanctuary. So this work, murmuration diagram, was created in the form of an kind of experimental diagram as an attempt to understand the murmurations. Actually, through technology, I traced over the flocks moving, and then where those tracings became heavy, I put a point, and then those points became the structure. That's this kind of light-filled diagram against this kind of setting sun. So some of the questions I was thinking about at the time were, how can we find our own pathway to understanding the movement of another creature? What can be learned in the process? And here's an installation shot. And my work is on the left, and the right and the work in the middle is a Kuchela's work called Glyphs of a Temporal Landscape. And it's a really special work where she collects things from her different walks and assembles them on these nails very low. So you really have to get down below to see them. And then I like that there were these shifting kind of sight lines within the exhibition, since she was more focused on the ground and I was more focused on the sky. And this work, root system, similar to the other work that I was showing you, but this one there's no wrapping, it's all knotted. And I was thinking a lot about roots at the time, networks kind of happening underground, and read a really moving story about how trees connect to one another through their root systems. And sometimes even after a tree is cut down, they still kind of feed it sugar. So I thought that was really kind of moving, a moving story. And the final form is so embedded in the process of making it. So every time another knot comes in, it sort of transforms the whole piece, and it's kind of constantly reshaping itself, echoing these different systems of habitat. And this piece is called Avian Oracle 1, 2, and 3. The composition began with an abstraction considering the activity of gaping. So if you think about like a gaping eye or a gaping mouth, gaping for starlings is when they take their beaks into the ground and they open them. When they're searching for food to make room for the worms, for example, or just when they're exploring their world. If you think about the way that children, do that they put everything in their mouth, that's kind of a similar thing. So I was really fascinated by that. And I read an amazing book at the time too, which was really gave me a very intimate understanding of what it's like to kind of live with another creature. It's called Mozart's Starling, if anyone is interested. So in the circular forms within this work, the form of a beak wide open merges with human forms, such as the eye, and plays with changing levels of light and darkness. In this work, there is a desire to see the starling up close and evoke a sense of touch. Almost every oracle from the series contains hand-needled felting in its center, and all the circular figures are surrounded by black velvet to mimic the earth. And this is a detail from the second oracle. So a recent study published in Science magazine kind of talks about this really devastating loss of 3 billion birds since 1970. So the oracle missing its center is meant to refer to that vanishing. And I was interested in the oracle as a figure that represents a being you would consult when trying to determine the future. And I thought here to turn to the loss of birds for guidance. On the wall opposite the oracles, because we're still going through the same exhibition, is a number of collages from the Study of Thorns series. I'm just going to check the time real quick. Okay. Because I often use paper stencils when I'm making the paintings, those were starting to pile up in the studio, just these, sprayed on pieces of paper. And I didn't really envision them as something I would want to create with, but an impulsive movement, which is, something I wish I would have known, is, to follow those impulses. Don't fight them, is how I kind of started working with those materials. So for me, there's a tension in how the elements are kept as versus how much they're altered, the scraps themselves. And in the beginning, I didn't alter them at all. I just, whatever shape it was, kind of became the shape that it was in the piece. And then later started kind of working more to alter them. But I was thinking about this series as a gathering of various processes and moments that echo an idea of an ecosystem. So the diversity of elements was a big focus, and that the parts weren't taken from any one work or time or way of working. I also like thinking about collage as sort of a form of time travel. And often you might be working with something you remember where it started, and kind of it might have felt like it was a lost moment. Oh, this work didn't really, it didn't really seem like it was going anywhere. But within the collage, it sort of finds its place. Just to show you some details too. And within this case too, in that installation I was just showing you, the series, each piece kind of floats above and below an invisible horizon line. So they're sort of shifting, falling, flying, and morphing between forms. And there's, for me, an intention to insert sort of hand-like forms, grabbing at bird-like creatures, and kind of hint at that ambiguity of, are they assisting? Are they trapping? Are they slipping through? So they contemplate not only flight, but also language, transformation, the built environment, and forests. The whole exhibition was really an attempt within my work to think about how we can learn about the life of another creature and engage with their activities. I wanted to understand their movements both up close and from afar, while thinking about habitat and systems of communication in the forest and within the earth. So this brings me to my last solo exhibition, which was just this past January to February at 65 Grand. And this was a really wonderful experience for me. The exhibition title is called Sliver. And basically thinking this is work from the pandemic. And I found myself walking so much more, being outside really frequently in the same places and noticing these subtle changes in the spring. And it was like something I've never really experienced before, that kind of really close observation on a daily basis and feeling really connected to that experience. So I was thinking a lot about growth contrasted with sadness. And one of the gestures I kept returning to was the sliver. And so I would begin with the tiniest, piece of scrap I could find, and I would just start to build without any, real understanding of how the piece would evolve. But it really felt like I was participating in this growth process that, for me, was really, really generative. So slowly they evolved into these more open and interwoven forms with a dynamic of interspecies plant behavior, revealing aspects of both fragility and resilience. So they're really just hanging on in a lot of places. And if you see them in person, there's a lot of depth to them. So they come out several inches. You can see parts that are dangling. They're just completely loose. And I was thinking a lot about the relationships plants have to light and to one another. Vines often grow in the shadows to find trunks that they can climb up onto, and roots underground are forming those deep supportive networks. So I was thinking a lot about their adaptive abilities and also how they're trying to find support in their environment. And sometimes it's at the detriment of that plant. All these pieces are mounted on the black velvet. So they're panels or stretchers with the velvet stretched over, and then mounted on top is the collage. So I was also very much interested in how they would fill in the darkness in different ways. And within each of the title, I tried to make reference to a sort of stage of growth. And something they didn't all have the panel behind them. So this one was on its own. But there was a real balancing within the elements too of kind of what, and I was sort of tempting fate in a lot of ways of just trying to kind of push it to these different extremes of where it's barely hanging on or holding together. But it really, to my surprise, everything very much so stayed in place. So here's another one. And this is the last one, dormant. So that takes me more or less up to the present. And then I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Tiger Strikes Asteroid. So I'm going to shift to that now. So I'm sharing some pictures from the last several years of openings, exhibitions, events, performances, other gatherings around the community of artist members and exhibiting artists that are part of TSA, where I've been an artist member since 2016 and am the current director. I have been for about the past year. And just to give you a little information about Tiger Strikes Asteroid, we are I'll show you some more pictures. Judith is on this call. She's in some of these pictures. Tiger Strikes Asteroid is a 501c3 nonprofit network of independently programmed artist-run spaces with locations in Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Greenville, South Carolina. Our goal is to collectively bring people together, expand connections, and create community through artist-initiated exhibitions, projects, and curatorial opportunities. We seek to build an ethos of cooperative achievement in the visual arts, creating the physical and emotional space for artists to show their work and exchange ideas on their own terms. Our artist-run model expands the artist role beyond that of studio practitioner to include the roles of curator, critic, and community developer, and provides an alternative model to the conventions of the current commercial art market. So I'm really grateful to Anna Kuntz and Michelle Wasson for the invitation to invite my husband and I to become members so long ago. They were both the former co-directors and really got the space up and running. What I can say is when I joined, I had no idea what was involved in curating or running a gallery space. And all these years later and many exhibitions later, I can say that I've benefited in a lot of ways through the experiences I've been fortunate to receive. One of the things I wish I had known sooner is how much I would enjoy the activity of curating and the work of running a gallery. Curating has afforded me the opportunity to expand on my interests and learn from so many artists, the ways that they talk about their work, the way that they present their work. I curated my first exhibition through TSA and since then, I've been curating in other spaces outside of it. So Columbia College, my husband and I co-curated a show at Glass Curtain Gallery called Water World. Weinberg Newton Gallery was an exhibition called Rebuilding the Present. And currently I'm co-curating a show at Mana Contemporary with Teresa Silva, another member, and that's opening in about a month, so May 22nd. And I hope that you guys can come and see the exhibition there and visit us at TSA and Mana Contemporary on the 4th floor. And I did want to just share a quick screenshot of our website in case you want to go on there. There's a huge archive. We've celebrated our 10-year anniversary. We've done so many different projects as a network, both nationally, internationally. You can go through and look at any of the exhibitions, read the press releases, look at images, look at different press reviews and things. So there's quite a bit of information on there if you'd like to learn more. And I think from there, I will go ahead and stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
Absolutely fantastic. The work you showed was really beautiful and amazing, and I really thank you so much for sharing all of that. I have a question for you to kind of start off the Q&A section here. One of the most interesting parts to me about all the work you showed is you're kind of at this amazing convergence of architecture and science and dance and music and all these like amazing things. And I'm interested in your own studio practice, how you kind of go about experimenting with some of these things, and also who are you looking at? Who are some of your influences that you're pulling some of these ideas from too?
Yeah, I mean, I think at any given time, I will be super interested in different types of artists. Like early on, the piece in the landscape, I was very much into land art at the time, and I was also looking at artists from collective actions and how they would gather in the landscape, or Franz Erhard Walter. His work was just like so inspiring to me at the time. But I think it's following the rabbit hole, depending on what is really inspiring at the time. So the choreography, I got so into Yvonne Rainer. I mean, I was like, I want to become a dancer. I was so excited by it. And I really, for a while, was thinking like, oh, am I taking too much time away from my own work to explore this whole other area? This isn't really realistic for me to become a dancer at this point in my life. But it really fed my practice in a lot of ways. I experiment a ton, and I feel like I do get blocked in the studio when I don't allow myself to just explore things. So oftentimes I'll say, you know what, this could be kind of a failed session, or, but I'm just going to go for it. And so usually those are the times I have some kind of breakthrough. But yeah, I think it's a process of kind of exploring and kind of trusting too in those things that just feel the most kind of alive to you.
Absolutely. And I think at the same time, there's such a clear through line between all of your work. And even though some things may be about, clearly some completely different subjects, you have this really unique way of approaching things in this cool architectural style. And I love it. What can I say? But I'm also really curious. You mentioned a few different residencies that you've been a part of too, and I'm curious maybe if you could share what your experiences were like at some of these, and maybe how they've influenced or affected your own practice as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really great. It's been an amazing thing to have, especially at times when I was working full time. And I mean, a residency for 6 weeks in Canada was like, I would just fall over because I was so overjoyed to have that time to really focus on my work after years of, just a regular 9 to 5 kind of job. And thankfully, my employer let me go and come back for one of those really long ones. So the Banff Center was amazing because we had both a writer and an artist that were leading leading the thematic of the residency, and it was very focused on plein air. So we spent time, in these beautiful mountains, working in the landscape, and also going to talks and reading together and doing seminars and studio visits, and also having fun, which is so important, responsible fun. But we had dance parties. Oh, we had a dance party that went all night long. And I remember I had to leave the next day. So I literally did not sleep. I just got on the bus and went to the airport, and it was 100% worth it. Other residencies were really, really different. The Banff Center was really well funded at the time. And we had these really big, awesome studios. But at Herald Arts, we shared space. It was more like a spot at a table with this huge amount of landscape. And so that was just an awesome thing to go on hikes and explore. I went to the recorders. I found a survey of the property and all this information about where prior buildings were. And I would go and do these little interventions and things around that. So that afforded me a whole nother type of opportunity. And then Sputnik Press, that was just phenomenal because I really got so much support from the printmakers there, and also suggestions. And there were other artists in residence at the time. And so, I learned a great deal from just working alongside of them, and they would share tips and things. Trying to think. And then the Chicago Artists Coalition was just, fantastic because you're working with curators, you're working with other artists. So you're all residents, and you have these shows coming up, and you can really kind of dig in a way that I hadn't previously. As much as I had exhibited in the past, it was generally more on the end of something was already complete and it sort of fit with the exhibition. And that wasn't 100% true with every show. Some shows I really made work more specifically for. But even in those cases, it wasn't so much about kind of developing a conversation together.
Right.
So I think that was just an amazing experience, and so many great conversations with all the residents and with our smaller kind of groups that we broke into as well around the exhibitions and the programming. So, yeah.
Awesome. I'd like to open it up for questions if anybody else here in the Zoom, and I'm monitoring the YouTube chat as well. So if you have questions over there, please feel free to drop them in there, but jump in, anybody that wants to.
I actually have a comment. Holly, you'll probably get questions from me over the next 6 months. But first of all, I just wanted to thank you. This was exquisite. As someone who's had the pleasure of following your work for a number of years and working with you, really a joy to see. But the comment I want to make, there's something so wonderful about seeing a long trajectory, and there's work I was not as familiar with. And it is so inspiring to see that thread of optimism that goes through all of your work. It's not about absolute certainty. It's not about things never going wrong, but I took some notes when you talked about the starlings with their internal compass. I just had the feeling that you were suggesting in all of your work that somehow we all possess that internal compass. And right now, during these extremely bizarro times when we all feel lost, that reminder that it's there, I just think could not be more timely or magnificent. And I'll shut up in a minute. But even that first work you started with your in-laws, that never realized place that they were going to build, that still wasn't lost because you found a way to make it visible and present in your way. And that was threaded through everything you said, and I'm sure you'll hear more from me, but thank you. It was just gorgeous.
Thank you, Judith. I love those observations. I don't know if I would have ever framed it quite that way myself because, I just hadn't, but I love how you're thinking of it. And it's wonderful to have the opportunity to look back like this and really see, kind of really reflect. And every time I do it, I feel like I learned something new. So thank you for that. And I've learned a ton from your work, Judith, that's for sure.
Right back at you.
Yeah, I would love to bring it back around to your practice. I totally agree with all of the things that have been stated. But as a former dancer and printmaker myself, I was really inspired by your conversation with like object and movement and like body and like the relationship between that. So kind of incorporating that dance piece into your work really kind of struck a chord with me, I think. And I guess like I really enjoy the aspect of your work that is process based and it's really like spontaneous, and that in some ways that's harder than having like a step-by-step plan, right? So I think I would love some advice as to like how you got to like being comfortable with that process, because I know it can be kind of daunting at times.
I know that's a great question. And to be honest, I spent a lot of time not inviting anyone into my studio and just giving myself full reign to do whatever it was that I felt like I wanted to do. And that continued for years. I wouldn't recommend necessarily like cutting yourself off for, years and years, but um, for me, it was a great thing to do, especially after graduate school, where I felt like there were a lot of voices in my head from all my instructors and professors. And as much as I respect all of them and all their opinions, I just all the time felt like I was being torn in these different directions. Um, so just making the space, and I feel like we all just really need a lot of space, and just giving yourself that opportunity to do something that isn't a finished work, that isn't something you think you will ever show, but felt like something you needed to do. Um, that would be my advice. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's worked for me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really resonated with that. So
Thank you.
I have a question for you. Moving towards Tiger Strikes Asteroid, I love the model of it, and I think it's been a very influential model just here in Chicago, especially. But can you talk about sort of how the membership of being a member of Tiger Strikes Asteroid works, like what you're afforded, how that membership happens, and why it's important,
Yeah, absolutely. So we have all our members are volunteer, and we all actually pay membership dues to cover our rent. As it is now, we each pay $75 a month. It is tax deductible because we are a nonprofit, but it is with that membership, you basically contribute to running the space, and about every year and a half, you have a slot that is really your slot to plan an exhibition for, to curate something with. And it can be for a guest curator, or it can be your own curatorial project. We also have a lot of projects that happen on the network level. And that's one thing that's really exciting about having all these locations all over the country that are connected, is that we can dream up things together. So we've done a number of different projects, whether they're fundraisers like Groundwork, which was part archive, and in part a fundraiser. And Meg Duguid was very much a part of getting that project up and running, and the ideas behind it. But it was really exciting because we We gave all this process-based work of artists that we invited. It was work that they didn't think they'd ever exhibit, and gave it to the collection at the New York Public Library, and then auctioned off part of those projects. We've also had international projects with Berlin and LA, did an amazing kind of exchange with other artist-run spaces. I mean, it's really wide open in terms of what a member might want to do or put forward. And with this exhibition now at Mana Contemporary, we're just super excited because it's going to be the first time that we've actually had all our members across the network be invited to join and be in an exhibition together, and see those kind of like common threads among practices, maybe, you know, outside of the different cities that they all are located in. But, you know, beyond that, I think for me, you know, whether I was curating or not, you know, sometimes doing just administrative things, but at the same time, every time a show was installed, I felt like I learned, you know, something new, or each conversation with an artist, just like really deepened my experience with the work, and being part of a community too, where you're really, you know, you're all working together to try to make this thing happen is, it's really a wonderful thing. And it doesn't mean that it's not ever challenging, because it can be, but you know, I feel very close to our members. We meet bi-weekly now, and we try to offer support for each other as well. So if someone wants to do a studio visit one week, then we do that. And it's fun. We read things together as well. Sometimes they're heavy and serious things, but we have really great conversations as a result of it. So there's just so many ways, and I think I'm, you know, still learning.
Absolutely. So what may be like some benefits from, you know, joining an artist space, kind of doing the artist space thing versus a more commercial gallery route?
Yeah, I mean, I've never gone the commercial gallery route, so it's hard to say exactly how they're different. But we don't focus so much on sales, and we do have sales sometimes, and we have inquiries sometimes. Um, so it's not that we're completely shying away from that altogether, because it can be so beneficial for an artist to help sustain their practice. It can be beneficial for us too, to have a little extra funding for the next project. So, but yeah, we are trying to be more experimental and invite artists to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do in a commercial space. And I know with Caroline Kent's exhibition about this past year, last September, she talks about that and some of her conversations where, you know, she really had this idea cooking for a while, but didn't quite feel like she had the space to do that piece. So I hope we also provide a platform where artists don't feel that stress of having, oh, I need to try to sell this work, but can really try to envision something that they might not have the opportunity to make otherwise.
Absolutely. And I think that that's extremely important, and I'm very glad you guys are doing that. Kind of we're coming to a close now. It's almost here at 2:00, but I just want to wrap up with two more questions that are kind of our go-to questions here for the SOFA Speaker Series. Number one, I'll give you the first one, and I'll give you the second one. How about that?
That sounds great.
So number one, what advice do you have for a student like us here that are almost at this point where we're graduating from, I think all of us are undergrads right here, and we're about to go into this greater art world?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, and I felt totally unprepared when I graduated from school. I had, you know, it was like, in a way, I was looking at the classified section looking for like painter wanted, you know, and not a house painter. But of course I never saw that. And so, you know, it took some time for me to find more gainful employment and to get that balance. But I would say, you know, one of the things I was trying to emphasize earlier is like, oh, I really love this work that I'm doing now, curating. I wish I would have known about this earlier. And I think back to an internship at the Hyde Park Art Center that I didn't think I had any experience that they would, actually give this internship to me. And so I was urging my husband to apply, and he actually got it because he had more experience in that way, but he ended up not taking it because he was going to be a little too demanding. Um, which is just to say that those opportunities that you think you might not qualify for, go for them anyway. If it's something you're really interested in, and you can balance an internship is a great way to kind of get your feet wet if you can manage something, with other employment. And I think it's realistic, depending on your background, but for fine artists, I think we often, find that it's hard to get work in the arts right away. But I think there's so much you can do, whether it's in arts administration or whether it's teaching at an art center, to kind of stay involved in the community. And I would just say, don't count yourself out. Just never count yourself out. People often are really, want to be helpful. They want to share their experience with you. So if there's someone that you really admire and you want to learn something from them, just email them, reach out. And they won't always respond, but, some people will, and they'll be really genuine and kind of like, might steer you in a direction that's helpful.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic advice. And finally, we've been wrapping up all of these SOFA Speaker series with a question. What other organizations, you mentioned Chicago Artists Coalition, the Hyde Park Art Center, Terrain a bit. Well, maybe we talked about Terrain beforehand a bit, but what are some other art institutions, art groups in town that you think are also working towards artist equity and doing things in unconventional ways?
I mean, I think there's probably too many for me to say without feeling like I'm leaving someone out. But I think that too, looking for places that are, if you want to continue exhibiting or if you want to make proposals, Roots and Culture accepts those. The Chicago Cultural Center, the Hyde Park Art Center. Hopefully Tiger Strikes Asteroid, because that's one of our goals for the future is to kind of start an open call. But I'd say there are a lot of opportunities, and 3Arts, definitely the Chicago Artists Coalition. There's so many wonderful spaces, and anyone else chime in if you're thinking of some that don't come to my mind at the moment. But I would say we have, an abundance of places here in Chicago.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much once again for coming to do this. Do you have any final plugs, anything going on that you would like to share?
Just really, I think I already plugged all my stuff. Yeah, I do hope that you guys can make it to Tiger Strikes Asteroid at some point. We have another weekend of open studio hours for Sydney Lewis. And then we are going to have a solo exhibition of Jacqueline Jakunski called Burning Oneself Out. And that I'm very, very excited about. The show, the network-wide show is going to be happening in mid-May at MANA. And so you can check out a couple exhibitions at once. The gallery at MANA is on the 5th floor and we're on the 4th floor. So it's all pretty close quarters. And there are other spaces in the gallery in the building too. I believe Baby Blue is there now. And so, yeah, it's worth the trip.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much once again. And I guess that this concludes the SOFA Speaker Series. And I'd like to thank everybody that has come out to all of these and supported these. And thank you once again, Holly, for giving such a wonderful, inspiring presentation.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for coming.
All right, thank you. All right, well, have a great rest of your Sunday, everyone, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.